In March 2004, a convoy of 3 armored vehicles crossed the international bridge at Laredo, Texas, under diplomatic escort. The passenger in the center vehicle was not a foreign official. He was not a protected witness. He was a cartel logistics chief responsible for moving hundreds of tons of cocaine and methamphetamine through western Mexico over the previous decade. He had not been captured. He had been invited. This man controlled highway shipment corridors from Michoacán to the Gulf of Mexico. He coordinated payments to military commanders, customs directors, and state police units. He managed a network of private airstrips, fuel distribution points, and port access arrangements that formed the circulatory system of one of Mexico's most powerful trafficking organizations. And now, he was changing employers. He was not surrendering to law enforcement. He was not seeking prosecution immunity. He was offering something different: names, bank accounts, payment schedules, and vote counts. He was offering the internal architecture of Mexican political corruption. In exchange, he wanted protection, not from the cartel, from the DEA. This is the story of how one of Mexico's most effective criminal operatives became a high-level CIA intelligence asset. How that cooperation reshaped the balance of power within Mexico's trafficking landscape. And how the systems designed to fight drug trafficking instead created new hierarchies of protected criminality. The man who would become one of the CIA's most valuable Mexican assets began his career in legitimate commerce. In the late 1980s, he operated a trucking company based in Lázaro Cárdenas, a Pacific port city in Michoacán state. The company hauled agricultural products, construction materials, and consumer goods along the highway corridors, connecting the coast to Mexico City and the northern border. The business was successful. It was also positioned at the intersection of geography and opportunity that would define his future. Lázaro Cárdenas was emerging as a major entry point for precursor chemicals used in methamphetamine production. Chinese suppliers shipped ephedrine and pseudoephedrine through the port in containers labeled as industrial chemicals. Traffickers needed reliable transportation to move these materials to processing facilities in Sinaloa and Jalisco. The trucking company owner understood logistics. He understood customs procedures. He understood which officials could be paid and which could not. By 1992, he had begun accepting contracts from individuals connected to the Tijuana cartel. The work was straightforward: move cargo from the port to specified destinations without inspection. The payments were substantial, far exceeding what legitimate hauling could generate. Over the following decade, he expanded his role. He established relationships with customs administrators at multiple ports. He negotiated protection arrangements with military commanders, responsible for highway checkpoints. He developed systems for laundering fuel purchases through a network of gas stations he acquired across 3 states. By 2000, he had become what trafficking organizations call a plaza boss, not a cartel leader, but a regional coordinator who controlled the infrastructure through which drugs moved. His value was not in product or territory. It was in access. He knew which politicians received cartel funding during election campaigns. He knew which military units could be trusted and which were loyal to competing organizations. He knew the banking relationships that facilitated money movement. He knew the internal rivalries that shaped cartel decision-making. This knowledge made him powerful. It also made him vulnerable. In 2003, internal conflict within his organization created existential risk. A leadership dispute had divided the cartel into competing factions. The faction he had aligned with was losing. His protection arrangements were being reassigned to rivals. His life expectancy was measured in months. He needed an exit. The approach came through an intermediary in Guatemala, a businessman with connections to both trafficking networks and the U.S. intelligence community. The intermediary arranged a preliminary meeting at a private residence in Guatemala City. Present were 2 Americans who identified themselves only by first names. The conversation was direct. The Americans explained that the Central Intelligence Agency was interested in information about Mexican political corruption, military collusion with trafficking organizations, and cartel financial infrastructure. They were not interested in drug seizures or criminal prosecution. They were interested in intelligence. If the logistics chief could provide this intelligence, he would receive protection, compensation, and immunity from U.S. prosecution. The offer was contingent on verification. Over the following weeks, he provided samples of his knowledge, names of officials receiving payments, amounts, delivery methods. The information was cross-referenced against existing intelligence. It checked out. In January 2004, the CIA station chief in Mexico City sent a classified cable to Langley, recommending formal recruitment. The cable described the potential asset as having unparalleled access to Mexican political military corruption networks and institutional knowledge of cartel financial architecture unavailable through technical collection. The DEA was informed of the recruitment. It objected. The agency had been building a case against the logistics chief for 3 years. Agents had wiretap evidence, financial records, and cooperating witness testimony. An indictment was being prepared. The CIA requested that the indictment be suspended. The Department of Justice agreed. In March 2004, the logistics chief crossed into the United States under diplomatic protection. He was assigned a code name, Orion. The debriefing process began at a secure facility in the Texas Hill Country. CIA officers spent 6 weeks extracting information from Orion in structured sessions that followed established protocols for high-value human intelligence sources. Each session was recorded, transcribed, and analyzed. The information was compartmentalized, distributed only to analysts with appropriate clearances and need-to-know authorization. The scope of Orion's knowledge exceeded initial expectations. He provided detailed accounts of payments made to elected officials at the federal, state, and municipal levels. He named governors, senators, federal deputies, and cabinet-level appointees who had received cartel funding. He described the mechanisms: cash deliveries, real estate transactions, campaign contributions through shell companies, and post-election consulting contracts. He mapped the military protection structure that allowed trafficking operations to function. He identified which generals and colonels were on cartel payrolls. He explained how military units were rotated to ensure that reliable commanders controlled critical checkpoints during major shipment periods. He documented the financial infrastructure in unprecedented detail. He provided account numbers at Mexican, Cayman, and Swiss banks. He identified the lawyers, accountants, and fund administrators who managed cartel money. He described the real estate portfolios, agricultural operations, and legitimate businesses that served as laundering vehicles. Most significantly, he provided insight into cartel political strategy. He explained how trafficking organizations selected candidates for support, how they calculated which races to invest in, and how they maintained leverage over officials after election. He described a system of political influence that was more sophisticated and more deeply embedded than U.S. intelligence had previously understood. The CIA classified Orion as a Tier 1 human intelligence asset, the highest designation for recruited sources. The terms of his cooperation were formalized in a written agreement. He would receive monthly payments of $50,000, administered through a shell fund registered in Curacao. He would be granted entry to the United States on a rolling 7-day visa that would be renewed quarterly. He would be provided secure housing, transportation, and communications equipment. In exchange, he would continue providing intelligence, he would submit to regular debriefings, and he would maintain his position within the cartel structure to preserve his access. This last requirement was the most consequential. Orion could not simply retire from trafficking and provide historical information. His value depended on current intelligence, ongoing payments, active operations, evolving political relationships. To provide this intelligence, he had to remain engaged in the activities that generated it. The CIA understood the implication. Orion would continue participating in drug trafficking while serving as an American intelligence asset. The arrangement was documented in classified memoranda that established the parameters of controlled asset integration. The agency would not direct Orion's criminal activities. It would not provide operational support for trafficking, but it would permit him to continue functioning within the cartel structure as a condition of his cooperation. DEA was informed of these terms. It objected strenuously. Internal communications from the period describe fundamental conflict between intelligence collection and law enforcement priorities. A senior DEA official wrote, "We are authorizing a known trafficker to continue trafficking in exchange for information. This is not interdiction. This is partnership." The objections were noted. They were not acted upon. Orion's cooperation continued. The intelligence Orion provided reshaped American understanding of Mexican organized crime. Prior to his recruitment, U.S. agencies had treated Mexican trafficking organizations primarily as law enforcement targets. The focus was on drug seizures, arrests, and prosecutions. The political dimensions of cartel power were acknowledged but not systematically analyzed. Orion changed this. His reporting revealed that Mexican trafficking organizations were not simply criminal enterprises. They were political actors with sophisticated strategies for acquiring and maintaining influence. They did not merely bribe officials. They selected, funded, and controlled them. This insight altered U.S. policy. Intelligence assessments based on Orion's reporting were shared with the State Department and the National Security Council. They informed diplomatic communications with the Mexican government. They influenced the allocation of security assistance under the Merida Initiative. Orion's value extended beyond political intelligence. He provided operational information about competing trafficking organizations, groups that threatened both his position within the cartel and American strategic interests in the region. He identified their leadership, their supply chains, their financial infrastructure, and their protection arrangements. This information was weaponized. The CIA shared selected intelligence with Mexican security forces through established liaison channels. The sharing was carefully managed to protect Orion's identity as the source. But the consequence was clear. Rival organizations were targeted for enforcement action based on information provided by a protected asset within a competing group. The results were dramatic. Between 2005 and 2010, several trafficking organizations operating in Orion's region were significantly degraded. Their leaders were arrested or killed. Their networks were dismantled. Their territories were absorbed by competitors. Orion's organization was not targeted. This pattern did not escape notice within the intelligence community. A 2008 CIA Inspector General review noted potential concerns regarding selective enforcement based on asset protection priorities. The review recommended enhanced oversight of intelligence sharing with foreign partners where protected assets might benefit from enforcement actions against competitors. The recommendations were classified. Implementation was limited. Orion continued operating. His dual role, cartel logistics coordinator and CIA intelligence asset, created a peculiar equilibrium. He provided information that advanced American intelligence objectives. That information targeted his competitors. The elimination of competitors strengthened his position within the cartel. His strengthened position gave him access to better intelligence. The cycle was self-reinforcing. Internal CIA documents from this period described the arrangement with clinical precision. One memorandum referred to controlled asset integration as a methodology for maximizing intelligence value while managing operational risk. Another noted that Orion had demonstrated the capacity to influence cartel strategic decision-making in directions consistent with U.S. collection priorities. The language was bureaucratic. The implications were not. The United States was not merely tolerating a trafficker's continued operations. It was benefiting from them. Orion's criminal activities provided the access that made his intelligence valuable. His intelligence enabled enforcement actions that strengthened his criminal position. The two systems had become interdependent. By 2010, Orion had provided intelligence that contributed to the arrest of 3 Mexican governors, 17 military officers, and more than 40 federal and state officials. He had also continued facilitating the movement of cocaine and methamphetamine worth billions of dollars. Both facts were true simultaneously. Neither negated the other. What follows is reconstructed from classified after-action reports, Mexican federal police records, and testimony provided to U.S. congressional oversight committees between 2012 and 2015. In September 2011, Orion received a communication through his secure channel with the CIA station in Mexico City. The message was brief: possible compromise. Stand by for extraction protocols. The source of the compromise was a leak within the Mexican Federal Police. A mid-level intelligence analyst assigned to the organized crime unit had been providing information to a cartel faction opposed to Orion's organization. The analyst had access to files documenting cooperation between Mexican security forces and U.S. intelligence agencies. Among those files was a reference to an unnamed senior cartel figure providing information on political corruption. The reference was vague. But within the cartel world, vague references could be fatal. Orion's handlers assessed the situation as critical. The leak had not identified him by name, but the description narrowed the field of possibilities. Anyone with knowledge of cartel operations could begin connecting dots. The agency activated extraction protocols. Orion was instructed to travel to a safe house in Guadalajara and await further instructions. He was to bring no family members, no associates, no documentation that could identify him. He was to leave immediately. He did not comply immediately. He had arrangements to finalize, money to move, people to warn. That delay nearly cost him his life. On September 14, 2011, a convoy of vehicles arrived at the residence where Orion was staying outside Guadalajara. The vehicles carried armed men affiliated with a rival faction, the same faction receiving information from the federal police leak. Orion was not present. He had left the residence 2 hours earlier, warned by a secondary informant within the rival organization that an attack was imminent. The men who arrived found the residence empty. They waited. Orion spent the night moving between locations, communicating with his CIA handlers through encrypted satellite phone. The agency coordinated with Mexican military contacts to arrange safe passage to an airfield in Jalisco State. The extraction occurred at dawn on September 15th. A private aircraft registered to a shell company in Delaware landed at the airfield. Orion boarded under armed escort provided by Mexican Marines whose commander had been informed only that he was transporting a high-value intelligence source. The aircraft flew directly to a private facility in Arizona. Orion did not pass through customs. He did not appear on any passenger manifest. He simply materialized inside the United States, protected by the same diplomatic mechanisms that had facilitated his entry 7 years earlier. The cost of the extraction was significant. 2 secondary informants who had assisted Orion over the years were identified through the federal police leak. Both were killed within a week. One in Michoacán, one in Mexico City. Their deaths were attributed to cartel violence. No investigation connected them to American intelligence operations. Orion's family was relocated separately. His wife and 3 children were brought to the United States through a different channel, housed in a secure location, and provided new identities. The operation that had produced years of intelligence was over. All documentation related to Orion was sealed under interagency protective measures. His existence as a CIA asset became a classified fact, accessible only to individuals with specific clearances and need-to-know authorization. In 2013, a civil lawsuit filed in Texas by victims of cartel violence referenced a protected foreign intelligence source who had received immunity from prosecution while continuing to facilitate drug trafficking. The reference appeared in sealed court documents. It was redacted in all public filings. Orion had disappeared, not into witness protection, but into the classified architecture of American intelligence. Orion's operation was terminated. His legacy persisted. The intelligence he had provided during 7 years of cooperation continued influencing American policy toward Mexico. His reporting on political corruption informed diplomatic communications and security assistance decisions. His documentation of military collusion contributed to reforms in how U.S. aid was allocated and monitored. Most significantly, his intelligence led to accountability actions that would have been impossible without an insider source. In 2012, Mexican authorities arrested a former state governor on corruption charges. The case was built largely on financial records that Orion had provided. Bank transfers, property deeds, and payment schedules documenting the governor's relationship with trafficking organizations. In 2013, 3 senior military officers were removed from command and prosecuted for protection arrangements with cartels. The evidence against them traced back to Orion's debriefings. In 2014, a federal deputy was expelled from Congress after documentation emerged linking him to cartel campaign financing. The documentation originated in Orion's files. These outcomes validated the CIA's calculation. Orion had provided intelligence of genuine strategic value. His reporting had exposed corruption at the highest levels of Mexican government. His information had contributed to institutional reforms that advanced American interests. But the calculation had another side. During the 7 years of Orion's cooperation, his organization had continued trafficking operations largely unimpeded by American enforcement. The drugs he helped move had reached American streets. The money he helped launder had funded continued violence. The protection arrangements he maintained had perpetuated the corruption he simultaneously documented. Congressional oversight committees began examining these trade-offs in 2014. Classified briefings to the House, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence described the Orion operation in general terms. Committee members raised concerns about the precedent being established. One senator, speaking in closed session, reportedly asked, "Are we saying that if a trafficker is valuable enough, we will let him continue trafficking indefinitely? Where is the line?" The agency's response was that each case was evaluated individually based on intelligence value and national security priorities. There was no categorical line. There was only case-by-case calculation. This answer did not satisfy all committee members, but no legislative action resulted. The legal framework that had enabled Orion's protection remained unchanged. No statute was passed limiting the CIA's authority to grant operational immunity to foreign assets. No oversight mechanism was created to review such arrangements. No reporting requirement was established for cases where intelligence priorities overrode law enforcement objectives. The system that had produced Orion continued functioning. By 2016, similar arrangements had been documented with assets in Colombia, Venezuela, and Honduras. Trafficking figures with access to political intelligence were granted protection in exchange for cooperation. They continued their criminal activities while providing information. They benefited from enforcement actions targeting their competitors. The pattern was recognizable. The justification was consistent. The consequences accumulated. A 2018 Treasury Department analysis estimated that trafficking organizations whose leadership included protected intelligence assets had moved approximately $12 billion in drug proceeds during the period of their cooperation. The analysis was classified. Its conclusions were not acted upon. The architecture of immunity had become institutionalized. In 2019, a Mexican investigative journalist published a series of articles examining cooperation between American intelligence agencies and cartel figures. The articles were based on leaked documents, interviews with former officials, and court records obtained through Freedom of Information requests. They did not identify Orion by name. His identity remained classified, but they described an unnamed senior logistics coordinator whose profile matched his operational history. The articles generated controversy in Mexico. Opposition politicians demanded investigations into how American agencies had protected cartel figures while claiming to support Mexican law enforcement. Civil society organizations filed complaints with international human rights bodies. Editorial boards questioned whether the Merida Initiative had been compromised by intelligence priorities that conflicted with its stated objectives. The American response was muted. The State Department declined to comment on intelligence matters. The CIA issued no statement. The Department of Justice referred inquiries to the intelligence community. Within the U.S. government, the episode prompted internal review, but no policy change. A classified assessment prepared for the National Security Council in 2020 examined lessons learned from the Orion operation and similar arrangements. The assessment acknowledged inherent tensions between intelligence collection and law enforcement priorities. It recommended enhanced coordination mechanisms between agencies. It did not recommend restricting the CIA's authority to protect assets engaged in criminal activity. The assessment concluded that Orion had been a productive intelligence source whose reporting contributed meaningfully to U.S. strategic objectives in Mexico. It noted that operational risks associated with asset protection were managed within acceptable parameters. The language of bureaucracy absorbed the moral complexity. Orion himself remained invisible. His location after extraction has never been disclosed. Whether he received permanent residence in the United States, whether he was relocated to a third country, whether he remains under agency protection, none of this is publicly known. His former associates in Mexico have provided fragmentary accounts. Some believe he is dead, killed by cartel rivals, or eliminated by his own handlers when his usefulness ended. Others believe he is alive, living under a new identity somewhere in the American Southwest or Central America. The truth is classified. What remains visible is the precedent his case established. The Orion operation demonstrated that trafficking figures with sufficient intelligence value could be protected from prosecution indefinitely. It showed that protected assets could continue criminal operations as a condition of their cooperation. It proved that the tension between intelligence collection and law enforcement could be resolved in favor of intelligence when the stakes were high enough. This precedent did not require formal codification. It was embedded in institutional practice, in the memoranda, the interagency agreements, the case-by-case calculations that determined whose crimes would be prosecuted and whose would be tolerated. The system learned from Orion. It did not learn to stop producing him. It learned to manage him more efficiently. Orion's real name has never been publicly disclosed. He exists in the official record only as a designation. A code name attached to classified files, sealed court documents, and redacted congressional testimony. His face has never been photographed for public distribution. His voice has never been recorded for public broadcast. His story has been told only in fragments, pieced together from sources who spoke on condition of anonymity and documents obtained through persistent legal action. He was not a major cartel leader. He was not a celebrity criminal whose name appeared in headlines or whose image circulated on social media. He was an operational figure, a logistics coordinator, a payment manager, a facilitator. His anonymity was his value. He could move through systems without attracting attention. He could maintain relationships without generating scrutiny. He could provide access to information that more prominent figures could never have obtained. The CIA recognized this value. It cultivated it. It protected it. For 7 years, Orion operated at the intersection of two systems that should have been opposed to each other. He served a trafficking organization that moved drugs into American communities. He served an intelligence agency that claimed to be fighting that traffic. Neither system prosecuted him. Both benefited from his work. The cartel gained a logistics coordinator who could navigate protection arrangements and financial networks with unusual sophistication. The agency gained an intelligence source with unprecedented access to Mexican political corruption. The drugs continued flowing. The intelligence continued producing. Inside the architecture of American foreign policy, this was not a contradiction. It was a calculation. The value of what Orion provided was weighed against the harm of what he facilitated. The calculation favored intelligence. This calculation continues to be made. In classified spaces, by officials whose names will never be known, decisions are rendered about which criminals will be prosecuted and which will be protected. The criteria are strategic, not moral. The outcomes serve institutional priorities, not abstract justice. Orion understood this. He exploited it. He survived because of it. His legacy is not the intelligence he provided or the corruption he exposed. His legacy is the proof that in the hierarchy of American priorities, information ranks above accountability. Power is not just what is known, it is who is allowed to keep operating.